What if in every aspect of our lives we gave God the absolute best we possibly could? Do you think it's possible? What if God actually asked for that? I believe with God, all things are possible. In every situation, we can give Him our best, but sometimes we need to acknowledge that we can't do it without Him. With God, all things are possible. See how you can give God the best in every situation this week on Behold the Savior. Well, good morning and welcome to Behold the Savior as we're studying how to give God our best. We want to give Him the best we can possibly give today. And my son actually taught me great things on this subject. He's working through his final stages of braces. He's going to be getting them off soon. And at the last visit to the orthodontist called us back while my son's on his chair. And he says his teeth are looking great. He's been doing everything. He's been brushing. He's been using his rubber bands. Everything. We couldn't ask for better results on this. And everything in the front is great. And we could take the braces off within the next visit or two, and wouldn't really be missing anything because everything is going well. Except the back teeth, they're not the best that they can be. They're still a little bit crooked. Just the very back two teeth. Nobody'd ever see it, but it's not the best that we can do. And he said, well, it's up to you what you would like to do. And I got to be honest with you, I had braces for 4 years, and I had 2 sets of braces because I had braces put on, and then I moved to another area, and the braces were so old and antiquated, they had to rip those off and put a whole other set of braces on. 4 years. I had had enough. I was ready for them to come off. So I'm thinking, my son, he's going to be, hey, let's get him off. But I said, Gabriel, this is your teeth. Why don't you decide? So the orthodontist said, okay, well, you guys talk it over. You give us a call and let us know. So we walked out of the orthodontist's office, and I was talking to my son, and I said, it's up to you. Whichever you want to do, I'm okay. I'm going to support you with. And he turned and he looked at me and he said, Dad, if you're going to do something, do it right. Do it the best that you can. That was very good words from him, and it's words that I try to live by. Obviously, I believe he was impressed by God for this. So he's going to finish out and do the best that he can for his teeth. After all, why do it? Sometimes we have the thinking, why do it right when you can do it twice? He wants to get it done right the first time. Well, today we're going to travel back in time, back to the beginning, and we're going to see about giving God our best. Today we're going to travel back to the Garden of Eden in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. Genesis chapter 4, and I'll turn here in my Bible as well. Genesis chapter 4 says, Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. So little did she know that this bouncing baby boy would one day grow up to be the world's first murderer. You have to wonder, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, if they could see what the effects of their rebellion would lead to only one generation later, would they have done things differently? Says, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Verse 2 says, Then she bore again, and this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Now, something that's very interesting here that I don't think it really matters in the grand scheme of things, but many theologians wonder now if Cain and Abel weren't twins. Now, notice the wording here in verse 2 says, Then she bore again. Didn't say she conceived again, then she bore again. Some people wonder if they weren't actually twins. And this actually makes a little bit more of an impression because twins seem to have a unique connection, a unique bond that seems to be a little bit unique. So you have 2 boys that would grow up to be men, obviously, 2 personalities, and you have two professions. And there's no reason to believe that each profession, either one, led them to or away from God in this instance. Two people, two personalities, two profession. There's no reason to assume a moral significance here. They both followed their interests, their passions, and that's a good thing. God invites us to do that. No two people are the same, and we ought to go and move in the personality and the talents that God has entrusted us with. Well, let's continue here into verse 3. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Now, here's where we need to stop and dissect this a little bit. They knew, Cain and Abel both knew and understood the sacrificial system very, very well. Now, I want you to think back with me. What is the very first thing on planet Earth that died? Very first thing on planet Earth. Many people say, well, it was when Cain killed Abel. And that's the first murder, but before that, there was death as well. Right after Adam and Eve sinned, what did they experience? They experienced nakedness. They were naked and ashamed. Well, with their nakedness, they covered themselves with fig leaves. And well, I guess technically that would be the first death. The plant would die. The leaf would die as they clothed themselves. But that clothing wasn't good enough. That clothing would wear away. It was impermanent. It was only temporary. And what did God clothe them with? Jesus clothed them with an animal skin. Where did he get the animal skin from? So Jesus actually showed Adam and Eve how to do the sacrifice. Now imagine you're Adam and Eve. You're Adam, you've named every single one of the animals, Barky the dog, Chirpy the bird, and, Fluffy the lamb, and all of these animals. And you've spent a little bit of time with them. And now because of your sin, your bad decision, now you have to see the innocent creature die. And imagine the weight of that on Adam and Eve. In fact, one writer says that Adam and Eve wept for the first plant that died like we weep for our loved ones today. They've never understood, they've never comprehended death and sin. Romans 6:23 says the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. So even though they sinned, God still wanted to clothe them. And this is obviously all the sacrifices pointed down in time to Jesus, the ultimate sacrifice. Cain and Abel knew the sacrificial system well because they were taught by Adam and Eve, who was taught by God himself. So in this instance, God was looking for an animal sacrifice. It was to be the spotless lamb. It was supposed to be the best. They wanted to give the best that they were able to for God. Verse 3 again says, in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. What are we offering God today? Are we offering him the best that we can? Are we offering the best of what we have? Or are we offering the best of what he wants? Am I giving God the best in all things? Let's think about appearances, for example. Am I giving God the best I possibly can in appearance? Now, have you ever gone out to the grocery store or something like that, and you see these people in their pajamas out and not sick or anything? I mean, it just seems to be a way of life. Go to the store sometime, just sit and people watch. It's absolutely fascinating. And I wonder to myself, I think, is that the best we can do for God? Now, I'm in a suit here because I'm on television. I don't wear a suit every time I go to the store. I don't wear a suit when I'm mowing the lawn and working out and everything. But I want to give the God the best that I can do in the circumstance that I'm in. I don't want my appearance to suggest that I worship a lazy, dirty God. When, you may be the only sermon that somebody ever sees, somebody ever hears. Everything we do, we're guiding people to God or away from God. Now, I want to reveal a God that sits on the throne as King of the universe. I don't want to exhibit a lazy, shiftless God that has been portrayed by some. How about in my home? Am I giving God the best that I can in my home? Does my house represent God's house? Is my house falling apart even though I have the ability to fix it up? Is my house filthy? Is there dishes stacked floor to ceiling, clothes all over the floor and dirty? Listen, I understand not having a lot of money to do things, but it doesn't cost much to be able to just clean up and organize. I want to give the best that I possibly can for God. When people come to my house, I want it to represent God's house. How about in other areas? How about one that is a little closer to the heart? Am I giving God my best in prayer and devotion? When it's time for devotion, for prayer, for time for Bible study, am I giving God leftovers? Am I waiting till the end of the day when I'm so exhausted I can't even keep my eyes open? Or do I want to give God the best in the morning when I wake up, when I'm energized? I want to put on the armor of God. I can give him my time and attention. And it may not be the morning for you, but you need to pick a time that you can give God the best that you can. That way he can give the best that he can. How about even in the subject of our churches? Am I giving God my best in church? Am I giving him the best in my participation? Am I giving him the best in the way I treat others? Am I giving him the best in the condition of my church? Many people don't realize the way we keep our church makes or breaks people's impression of God when they come. If someone's coming to a church and things are falling apart, there's cobwebs all over the place, and there's things that are broken, that does not suggest that I want to give God the best I can. It's his house. In all things, let's give God the best that we can. Genesis chapter 4, verse 4. In Genesis 4, we're talking about giving God the best of what he asks for, not the best of what I want to give. Cain brought a sacrifice of fruit, of grain. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering. Now notice the wording there at the last sentence, and the Lord respected Abel and his offering. Did you notice it doesn't say the Lord respected the offering and Abel? It says the Lord respected Abel and his offering. This tells me that God is more interested in the person than the offering. Why? Because what's being offered emulates from the heart of the person that's giving it. And this is why I want to give God the best I can, because I want to give him my heart. Abel's mentioned as being accepted here. And what about Cain? Is he giving God the best that he can? And you know, ultimately, if we're giving God ourselves and withholding nothing back, then we're giving him everything that we possibly can. Genesis chapter 4, verse 5. But he did not respect Cain and his offering. Notice the wording. He did not respect Cain and his offering. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. Cain here, he suggests no sign of sorrow, no sign of guilt, no sign of remorse. The only emotion that he expresses is anger. You know, the devil can work with our anger. I want to give God the best that I can. I don't want to give the devil the best that I can of my emotions. You know, when we're tempted to lose our temper, anytime we lose our temper, the devil finds it. Cain wasn't sorry, he wasn't unhappy, he wasn't remorseful, he was angry. Why? Because Abel's sacrifice was accepted and not his. All he displayed was contempt for his brother. But let me ask you, why was God not pleased with Cain's offering? It's a simple question. Why was God not pleased with what Cain gave? The answer is just as simple, because it's not what God asked for. God asked for this, and Cain gave this. When God asks us of something, that's what he wants. When he asks something from our hearts, that's what he wants. Genesis chapter 4, verse 6. So the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen?" Now this is personal contact from God to Cain. Anytime you see God asking a question in the Bible, it really needs to draw our attention to that. Does God know why Cain was angry? Yeah, he knows everything. Why did he ask Cain the question then? Anytime you see a question asked by God, we really need to pay attention to it. First question that I know of in the Bible that's asked is after Adam and Eve sinned, God called out to Adam and Eve. He said, "Where are you?" Did God know where they were? Yes. It's not like he said, I just created them a couple days ago, a week ago, whatever it was. Where did they run off to? He knew exactly where they were. Why did he ask the question then? Because he wanted them to think, why were they hiding? God here wants Cain to understand why he's angry. I'll tell you a story here. There was a man and a woman. They were just newly married. And a little while into the marriage, still early, but a little while into the marriage, the husband, he got home a little early from work, and he had his feet up, he was watching TV, and he was having a little snack before supper. And it came time for his lovely wife to come home. The wife comes home, and right off the bat, "What are you doing? Get your feet off the table there. And what are these dishes piled up here for?" And the guy was just taken by surprise. He didn't understand. Where did this come from? So he just sort of got himself together and cleaned up, and he was sorry that she wasn't happy. He didn't understand what happened, though. But he noticed this seemed to happen about 28 days or so, about every 28 days. And after a while, he started to realize, wait a second, it's not me that she's angry at, because after she cooled down a little bit, then she starts to unload on what happened earlier in the day. So next time when she comes through the door and she's a little on edge, a little agitated, he doesn't fly off the handle. He doesn't lose his control. He says, "Wait a second. Honey, tell me, why are you angry? What happened at work today?" And then she got a chance to explain to him. This is what God was trying to do with Cain. He needed him to understand why he was angry. Sometimes we can't understand it unless somebody draws our attention to that. Genesis chapter 4, verse 7. "If you do well, will you not be accepted? If you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it." 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion." Now, I want you to pay attention to the wording here in this verse. Let me go back to it again. "And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door." In other words, things come around. They come full circle. I do bad things are going to happen. It's just the natural law of things. The wages of sin is death. We sin, we experience death. And its desires for you. Now, here's the highlight point. Here's the hope. But you should rule over it. The devil wants to rule in your life. He wants sin to be the reigning factor in your life, but it doesn't have to be. God says that you're to rule over it. That means that addiction that maybe you're suffering from, this trauma, this bad decision from the past, sin does not have to reign in your heart. God can reign in your heart. What he wants to do is cleanse us from these things. Don't ever think that you're condemned to a past life of sin. It doesn't have to be like that. Genesis chapter 4, verse 8 says, "Now Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass." Notice it says Abel his brother. Reminds us that they're brothers. "When they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel," and by the way, it's his brother, "and killed him." Can you imagine? 1 John 3:12 says, "Cain, who was of the wicked one and murdered his brother." And why did he murder him? Because his works were evil and his brother's righteous. So do you see what the problem was there? The issue was that he was jealous. God accepted this, but he didn't accept mine. God, he could have turned, he could have repented, but he didn't. He just jumps right to anger. Imagine if Cain gave God his best. He wouldn't have murdered his very own brother. Imagine if Adam and Eve had given God their best in the Garden of Eden. God wanted obedience. They did not give obedience. Why? Why does God want obedience in the first place? God placed the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the center of the Garden of Eden. And he had to allow them to trust in him. He said, here's this tree, don't eat it. And the devil manipulated them. Why did he say don't eat it? He could see beyond the portals of time. He could see the effects of the rebellion. He looked down forward into time and he saw the wars. He saw the kids with cancer. He saw the broken families, all because of their bad decision. And this is why he said, trust me. And I wonder if, he was thinking, or maybe he said, if you could only see what would happen from your disobedience. And I wonder if they could see all of the results of this, would they still have done it? Unfortunately, we can't see through time. We can't see the future results, so that must mean that we must then need to rely on God. Imagine if Cain gave his best. Imagine if Adam and Eve gave his best. Imagine if you gave your best. Then God says, where is your brother Abel? Now he starts out with tact. He says, why are you angry? And then he says, where is your brother Abel? And it increases here. My daughter, she doesn't like to get up in the morning. She is not a morning person. And when it's time to wake her up, I knock on the door. Good morning, Isabel. It's time to get up. And, she rolls around. I can see she's starting the process. And then I go back a minute or two later, and then I go and shake her and say, good morning, beautiful. It's time to wake up. And then I go back again, and she's still sleeping. And I get a little bit more intense this time. I say, hey, it's time to get up. We've got some things to do today. You need to get ready for the day. And I go back to doing what I'm doing. And then the next time I come back, it's a little bit more intense. It's taking the covers off, dragging her out of bed, and say, get up or else. This is the way God reacts and does and treats us also. He tries tact, he tries love, but it has to increase until he finally gets our attention. Here he gets to the point where he says, where's your brother Abel? Two vastly different answers between what the answer to the question that God's asking Cain and the answer to the question that God asked Adam and Eve. Here, all Cain says is, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? Can you imagine? Cain boldly denied his guilt here. And God, he increases another step here. He says, what have you done? And imagine hearing the voice of God. Imagine if every time we sin, every time we made a bad decision, we heard God's voice and we heard him say, what have you done? Now, I think we can still hear his voice through the Holy Spirit. We can sense. We know the difference between right or wrong. This is a blessing that God has given us. In Genesis 4:11, it says, so now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. A fugitive and a vagabond you shall be on the earth. Still, no remorse, no regret. Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Sort of like Judas. Doesn't necessarily seem sorry for what he has done. He just seems sorry that he had gotten caught. With Cain, doesn't seem sorry for what he had done. He just seems sorry for the consequences of his actions. Says, by the way, this is more than I can bear. And in verse 14 says, surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden from you, from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth, and it will happen that anyone who finds me will kill me. Now imagine this. He's a farmer. His brother Abel was a farmer. He was a shepherd, and Cain is a farmer. You cannot be a good farmer if you're a vagabond. The ground would never produce for him again. Now he has no way for a livelihood. He can never stay put. This is the fruits of his rebellion. Verse 15, God responds, and the Lord said to him, therefore whoever kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark on Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him. Now, God could have just killed Cain. He could have just snapped him out of existence. He could have done 1,000 different things, but he allowed him to live. This is not God excusing what he had done. This is God extending mercy. Now, The Bible doesn't say, but wouldn't it be nice if eventually through time Cain repented? He repented of his sins. Wouldn't it be nice if he went back to his family and was able to swallow his pride, apologize, hug, and get back the things that he had lost? We don't really find that as an example here, but there is still hope. He was marked. The mark probably wasn't literal. The mark of the beast in Revelation doesn't seem to be literal. It seems that everybody is marked by themselves, but God can see that mark. The others could see that in Cain's time. Now, I want to tell you about this scripture here, this passage from Our High Calling. We are to give God all there is of us, and in giving to God our all, are we to consider that we sustain a great loss? No, for in giving to Him our talents, we are doubling them. Every gift He has given to us, when returned to Him, receives His blessing, that it may have increased influence in the work of God. Wherever you may be, you are to realize that you belong to Christ. I want to tell you of a story in somebody's hands. There was a woman, she had a teenage daughter. This teenage daughter was embarrassed of her mother, didn't even want to be seen in public with her. You see, she had these mutilated, scarred arms, and this teenage daughter, she was just embarrassed. Well, one time they were out together, they went to a grocery store, and it was time to hand the clerk the money, and the mother reached into her purse and reached out, and just then her shirt sleeve pulled back, and her arm was revealed, and the clerk was just taken back in horror. She was just shocked by it. Instantly, the daughter, who was embarrassed of her mother, burst into tears. She ran out of the store. But this mother, she understood. She knew the heart of the child. She understood the walk that the child was in at that time. So they drove home very quietly. And then when they got home, she allowed her daughter to go up and be in her bedroom for about an hour just to process what had happened. She knows she needed a little bit of time. And imagine how much this broke the mother's heart, too, by the way. But she had to look at the best interest of her child as well and help her to understand. And then that's when it hit her. I have to help her to understand. So she went up into her daughter's bedroom, and she showed her arms, and she said, "You've seen my arms before. You know that they're scarred, and I obviously wasn't born like this. But I've never told you what had happened. You see, when you were a baby, I was asleep, and you were in your crib in your bedroom. And I was awakened by the smell of smoke in this intense heat. Your bedroom had caught on fire. Flames were crawling up the wall. Smoke was billowing out. I was closer to the other end of the house. I could have just gotten out of the house." And she said to her daughter, "But I would rather die with you than live without you. So I ran into your room. I reached in, grabbed you up out of the crib in your blankets, and I was coming out of the house. My arms were on fire. My clothing was on fire. My skin was bubbling. I could see it. And as I walked out, I just collapsed with you in the front yard." By this point, the fire department was there. And she said, "But when I looked at you, I didn't feel any pain at all. All I could experience was joy that you were still alive." Now her daughter understood the scars that she had had. Never again was she embarrassed of her mother's scars. And she wanted to give her the best that she could as a daughter. Jesus has scars from saving us as well. Jesus has done everything for us. How would you like to give God your best? Thank you, and God bless.